You know what's more terrifying than noise? Silence. If you've ever stepped inside an active aircraft manufacturing facility, it's one of the loudest environments on Earth. Riveting machines, pounding metal, hydraulic presses shaping components, forklifts moving massive parts across factory floors, workers shouting instructions over the constant roar. But at the Boeing Everett factory in Washington State, the largest building in the world by volume, a facility that once employed 35,000 workers and produced some of the most advanced aircraft ever built. That sound is vanishing. Walk through certain sections now and you hear absolutely nothing. Empty assembly bays, idle machinery, the echo of your own footsteps. The silence is haunting. It's the sound of an industry dying, not because it lost the ability to build incredible planes, but because political decisions made thousands of miles away obliterated the market it depended on. And if you want to understand how quickly American manufacturing dominance can evaporate, how a single policy mistake can unravel decades of engineering excellence and skilled labor, you need to understand what's happening to Boeing right now. Hit that subscribe button right now because you're going to want to catch every video I release. Because what's happening isn't a temporary downturn. It's a structural collapse. And the beneficiary isn't China, not Europe in the way you might expect, but Canada, a country most Americans think of as a friendly neighbor, not a competitor. But Canada just became the most important aerospace hub on the planet, and Boeing workers in Seattle are paying the price. What officially happened is that a 300% tariff got slammed on Bombardier's C-Series aircraft, a small narrow-body jet designed to carry between 150 passengers. The justification was that Bombardier was receiving unfair subsidies from the Canadian government and selling planes below cost to undercut Boeing. The evidence was thin. Bombardier had received support. But so had Boeing in the form of defense contracts, tax breaks, and research partnerships worth billions. The real reason was political. There was pressure to be seen protecting American jobs, punishing foreign competitors, demonstrating toughness. And Boeing, one of the largest employers in Washington State, had lobbied aggressively for the tariffs, but the tariffs backfired spectacularly. Bombardier, facing existential financial pressure, sold a 50.1% stake in the C-Series program to Airbus for $1. Airbus effectively got control of one of the most advanced aircraft programs in the world for the price of a candy bar. Smash that like button right now if this is making sense to you. And then they did something brilliant. They rebranded the plane as the Airbus A220, moved some final assembly to a plant in Alabama to avoid the tariffs entirely, and started marketing it aggressively to airlines around the world. And the plane, which had been struggling to find buyers when it was called the Bombardier C-Series, suddenly became one of the most sought-after aircraft in the industry. Why? Because it was more fuel efficient than the Boeing 737, more comfortable for passengers, cheaper to operate, and now backed by Airbus, one of the two most trusted names in aviation. Airlines that had been loyal to Boeing for decades started switching, and major carriers placed massive orders for the A220. And every single order for an A220 was an order that would have gone to Boeing's 737. The financial impact was immediate and devastating. Boeing's backlog of narrow-body aircraft orders started shrinking. Production schedules got cut, shifts got reduced, and then came the layoffs. Let me show you what this looks like on the ground, because the human cost is always the part that gets erased from financial reports. Meet someone we'll call Mike, 52 years old, born and raised in Everett, Washington. His father worked at Boeing for 43 years, retiring with a pension that allowed him to live comfortably. Mike started at Boeing right out of high school 34 years ago, working on the assembly line, installing hydraulic systems into 747 seconds. Over the years, he worked his way up to supervisor, managing a team of 18 workers responsible for fitting wings onto 737 fuselages. He made $78,000 a year with full benefits, overtime when needed, and a pension plan that would have let him retire at 62 with 80% of his salary. Mike bought a house in 1998, raised two kids there. His son David just started at university studying mechanical engineering, hoping to follow his father and grandfather into aerospace. His daughter Emma is a junior in high school, plays soccer, wants to study veterinary medicine. His wife Karen works part-time at a dental office. They weren't rich, but they were stable. They took a vacation every summer. They had about $43,000 in savings. Mike planned to work another 10 years, retire at 62, spend time fishing, maybe travel a little. In October, Mike got called into a meeting. 17 other supervisors were there, all looking nervous. The manager explained that Boeing was reducing 737 production by 40% due to declining orders. They needed to cut headcount by 8,000 across the region. Mike had 34 years, but the cuts were so deep that even people with his tenure weren't protected. He was offered a buyout, 24 months of severance, continuation of health insurance for 1 year, and job placement assistance, or he could transfer to a facility in South Carolina, working on a different aircraft at a lower pay grade, starting at $58,000 a year with no relocation assistance beyond moving his personal belongings. Don't go anywhere, because the most explosive part is coming right up. Mike spent 3 days agonizing over the decision. If he took the South Carolina job, they'd have to sell the house, probably at a loss. David would have to transfer schools. Emma would have to leave her friends in the middle of junior year. Karen would have to quit her job, leave her mother who needed help. And even if they made all those sacrifices, the job wasn't guaranteed. Mike took the buyout. He signed the papers, cleared out his locker, and walked out of the factory for the last time. He sat in his truck in the parking lot for 20 minutes and cried. 52 years old, and he cried because the only job he'd ever known was gone. For the first month, Mike told himself he'd find something else. He applied everywhere. He got 3 interviews in 6 weeks. One company said they weren't hiring. One offered him a job at $22 an hour, less than a third of what he'd been making. No benefits. One never called back. His severance will run out in 16 months. David's tuition is $32,000 a year. Mike had been planning to help with $15,000 annually. Now he can't help at all. David is talking about transferring to community college. Emma wants to go to school for veterinary medicine. Out-of-state tuition is $60,000 a year. There's no way. His mortgage is $2,400 a month. Total monthly expenses hit about $5,200. Karen's part-time job covers less than half. Mike has started driving for rideshare on weekends, making maybe $300 if he works Friday, and Saturday nights until 3 in the morning. It's not enough. 3 months after losing his job, the psychological toll became undeniable. Mike wakes up at 5:30 every morning, the same time he woke up for 34 years. But now he has nowhere to go. He sits at the kitchen table scrolling through job postings that pay wages he can't survive on. The tension in the house is building, and they argue about money constantly. Emma asked if she could go on the senior trip. It cost $1,200. Mike had to say no. She cried. He felt like he failed her. David came home for Thanksgiving, barely speaking, working 25 hours a week at a campus bookstore, his grades slipping, looking exhausted. Mike went to his doctor because of chest pains. The doctor said it was stress, that his blood pressure was dangerously high. The medication costs $80 a month. His insurance runs out in 6 months. Drop a comment right now telling me if you've seen this happen in your area. I read every single one. This is what economic collapse looks like at the human level. It's not just losing a paycheck. It's losing your sense of purpose, your identity, your confidence that the future will be okay. Mike spent 34 years believing that if he worked hard, he'd be taken care of. That belief is shattered. And Mike isn't alone. Meet someone we'll call Sandra, 41 years old. Worked at Boeing for 16 years as a quality assurance inspector. Her job was checking every component before aircraft left the factory. High-pressure work where mistakes could cost lives. Sandra made $63,000 a year supporting herself and her 12-year-old daughter as a single mother. Her position was simply eliminated, no buyout, just 2 weeks of severance, 16 years of spotless performance, and she got 2 weeks of pay. Sandra applied for unemployment. The system was so overwhelmed it took 6 weeks to process her claim. During those weeks, she had no income. She burned through savings, put groceries on credit cards, skipped her car payment, begged her landlord for a rent extension. After 4 months, Sandra found work at a call center handling customer complaints for $17 an hour. No benefits. She moved to a cheaper apartment. Her daughter had to change schools, leave her friends, start over. Sandra used to ensure that every rivet, every seal was perfect on aircraft that flew presidents and families. Now she apologizes to strangers about late shipments. This is the story of 8,000 families in the Seattle area alone. 8,000 workers who did everything right, who showed up, who built planes that carried millions of passengers safely, who believed that loyalty and skill would be rewarded. And all of it evaporated because a tariff imposed to protect Boeing ended up destroying Boeing instead. Subscribe immediately if you haven't already, because this content doesn't exist anywhere else. Now, let me show you the other side. Meet someone we'll call Jean-Francois, 46 years old, lives about 30 miles north of Montreal. He's worked in aerospace for 22 years, working his way up to production lead. For the past 8 years, he's been working on the C-Series program, now the A220, overseeing the assembly of wing structures. When the tariffs got imposed, Jean-Francois thought he was going to lose his job. The C-Series program had been struggling financially. Orders were slow. Rumors of layoffs were constant. But then Airbus stepped in. The plant wouldn't only stay open, it would expand. Airbus was committing $2 billion to upgrade the facility, increase production capacity, and hire more workers. Jean-Francois not only kept his job, he got promoted. Airbus recognized his expertise. He now manages a team of 35, overseeing 2 shifts. His salary went from 68,000 Canadian to 92,000, about 68,000 American, less than Mike was making. But Jean-Francois doesn't pay for health insurance. His kids go to well-funded public schools. His commute is 25 minutes. He works 50 hours a week during peak production, but rarely more. He gets 5 weeks of vacation. His pension is guaranteed. Jean-Francois' town is booming. It's transforming into an aerospace hub. New restaurants, new shops, new housing developments going up. The local high school just opened a new wing with science labs and robotics programs funded by aerospace companies. Property values are up, which is great for Jean-Francois, who bought his house 12 years ago. The aerospace sector isn't just one company expanding. Major manufacturers are building massive new facilities, employing thousands of workers. Engine makers are hiring aggressively. Research centers are opening. The entire ecosystem is growing, creating opportunities that didn't exist 5 years ago. Jean-Francois' son just graduated with a degree in aerospace engineering. He already has 3 job offers, all locally, all paying more than 70,000 Canadian to start. He's staying. He doesn't need to move to Seattle or anywhere else. The jobs are here. Do me a favor and slam that like button because it genuinely helps this video reach more people. The contrast between Mike, Sandra, and Jean-Francois isn't about individual merit. They're all skilled, experienced, dedicated. The difference is that Mike and Sandra are trapped in a dying industry while Jean-Francois is thriving in a rising one. Geography, not ability, is determining their futures. And the political decisions that created this divergence were made by people who never set foot in a factory, who never built anything, who never considered the human consequences. Now let's zoom out and look at the structural forces reshaping the global aerospace industry. because understanding how this sector works is essential to understanding why these tariffs were so catastrophic. Aerospace isn't like other manufacturing. You can't just decide to build planes and start production. It requires decades of accumulated expertise, billions of dollars in infrastructure, thousands of highly trained workers, and deep relationships with suppliers who provide tens of thousands of specialized components. A modern commercial aircraft contains roughly 2.5 million individual parts. Every single part must meet exacting specifications. Tolerances are measured in thousandths of an inch. A single failure can be catastrophic. For most of the 20th century, the United States dominated global aerospace. American companies built the planes that won World War II, that connected continents during the jet age. Even after European manufacturers emerged as serious competitors in the 70s, Boeing remained the industry leader. Revolutionary aircraft set new standards for efficiency and reliability. Boeing wasn't just a company, it was an American institution. But that dominance depended on a stable ecosystem: suppliers, engineers, regulators, airlines, all working together, trusting that the system would remain predictable. Aerospace is a long cycle industry. It takes years to design a new plane, years to certify it, years to ramp up production, and decades to recoup the investment. You can't do that in an environment of chaos and uncertainty. The tariffs shattered that trust by weaponizing trade policy, by treating aerospace as just another industry where political pressure could extract concessions, and a signal went out to the entire global supply chain that the United States was no longer a reliable partner. And once that signal went out, companies started hedging. They started building capacity outside the U.S. They started forming partnerships that didn't depend on American goodwill. And Canada, with its advanced manufacturing base, skilled workforce, stable political environment, and geographic proximity, became the obvious alternative. Stay with me, because what I'm about to reveal will change how you see this completely. Boeing's leadership believed the tariffs would cripple Bombardier, force the company to abandon the C-Series or sell at a massive loss. They saw the C-Series as a minor competitor that needed elimination. What they failed to understand is that the C-Series was competing on performance, not price. It was a genuinely superior aircraft. When Airbus acquired the program for $1, Boeing realized too late they'd handed their biggest competitor a gift. Airbus moved with stunning speed, leveraging existing supply chains and regulatory relationships. Within 18 months, the rebranded A220 was selling faster than Bombardier ever managed. Boeing leadership tried to downplay the threat in investor calls, but orders were evaporating. Major airlines placed huge orders, and the market had shifted. Canadian leadership recognized the opportunity and moved aggressively. A $15 billion investment in aerospace infrastructure over 10 years got announced. New research facilities, subsidized training programs, tax incentives, streamlined regulatory approvals, partnerships between government, industry, and academia. The results have been staggering. Major engine manufacturers announced multi-billion-dollar expansions, creating thousands of jobs. Competent suppliers opened new plants. Major aerospace companies shifted significant production northward because Canada offered incentives, incentives, stable labor relations, and skilled workers without visa restrictions. Even space companies started sourcing components from Canadian suppliers because the quality was high, costs competitive, and the political environment stable. Comment below and tell me your thoughts on this, because I'm genuinely curious about your perspective. And here's the part that should alarm anyone who cares about American manufacturing. These moves aren't temporary. Once a company builds a facility, invests hundreds of millions of dollars, trains a workforce, establishes supplier relationships, it doesn't move back. The investment is sunk. The expertise is embedded. Canada isn't just competing with the United States, it's replacing it. The consequences for Boeing are existential. The company still builds advanced aircraft, military systems, satellites, but its dominance in the narrow-body market is eroding rapidly. Airlines are buying European aircraft instead, and every lost sale means fewer workers needed in Seattle, fewer suppliers in the region, fewer engineers hired. The ripple effects extend far beyond factory floors. Building an airplane requires hundreds of companies, manufacturers who make seats, galleys, lavatories, companies that produce specialized fasteners, adhesives, composite materials, electronics firms that design avionics, software companies that write flight control systems, all depend on production schedules. When Boeing cuts production from 52 planes per month to 30, all those suppliers feel it immediately. Seattle is already experiencing this contraction painfully. Major parts manufacturers laid off over 1,000 workers last year. Another closed the plant, eliminating 900 jobs. A components company went bankrupt. It's 230 workers losing jobs overnight with no severance. The economic pain is spreading through the region. Multiple cities are hemorrhaging jobs. Families are leaving. Schools are losing enrollment. Tax revenues are collapsing. Local governments are cutting services. The human cost is staggering. Think about all the workers who depend on the aerospace ecosystem: machinists, electricians, composite technicians, engineers, quality inspectors, logistics coordinators, administrative staff, and then think about all the adjacent jobs: the restaurants where workers eat lunch, the coffee shops, the gas stations, the grocery stores, the child care centers. When 8,000 aerospace jobs disappear, the real impact is closer to 25,000 jobs when you account for the multiplier effect. Housing markets are collapsing. Some areas have seen property values drop 18%, others down 23%, rents falling. People are walking away from mortgages. Foreclosures are spiking. Neighborhoods are filling with empty homes. Schools are losing funding. Districts are cutting music and art programs, increasing class sizes, eliminating teaching assistants. Libraries reducing hours. Community centers charging higher fees. The entire social fabric is unraveling because political leaders made decisions without understanding how aerospace actually works. If this is blowing your mind, hit that like button immediately. Meanwhile, the Quebec Aerospace Corridor is experiencing the opposite. Housing prices up 32%, new schools being built, local government investing in parks, transit, cultural facilities, youth sports. The community is vibrant, growing, optimistic. This is what economic momentum looks like when it's building instead of collapsing. The political dimension of this disaster reveals how completely leadership at Boeing and in government misunderstood the aerospace industry. They thought they could bully Bombardier into submission, protect Boeing's near monopoly, but aerospace doesn't work like that. It's a highly sophisticated, globally integrated industry where quality, reliability, and long-term relationships matter more than anything. Airlines don't buy planes because of tariffs. They buy based on fuel efficiency, passenger comfort, range, maintenance, costs, and trust. The A220 is simply a better plane than the aging variants it competes with. It burns 15% less fuel. It has a larger cabin, better range. It's quieter. It has modern avionics that make it easier to fly and maintain. Airlines ran the numbers and realized the operating savings over 20 years more than justified the investment. And once airlines realized they could buy it without tariffs through final assembly in Alabama, the game was over. Airbus got access to the U.S. market. Bombardier's technology and workforce remained in Canada. And Boeing was left with an aging product line and no competitive response. What Canadian leadership understood and what others didn't is that the future of aerospace isn't about protecting yesterday's monopolies. It's about building tomorrow's capabilities. Canada isn't trying to recreate Boeing. It's building something different, something more nimble, more innovative, more responsive to what airlines actually need. Canadian aerospace companies are investing heavily in next-generation technologies, electric and hybrid propulsion systems, advanced composite materials, autonomous flight systems, sustainable aviation fuels. Universities are expanding aerospace engineering programs. They're graduating thousands of engineers every year who are choosing to stay because the opportunities are there. The brain drain has reversed. Now, American engineers are moving north. Boeing's path forward is uncertain. The company could invest in developing a brand new aircraft to compete with the A220, but that would cost tens of billions and take a decade. Boeing doesn't have the resources after previous disasters. The company could try to acquire a competitor or partner with a foreign manufacturer, but the political environment makes that nearly impossible. Or Boeing could double down on designs that first flew in 1967. That's the path they seem to be on, and it's a path toward irrelevance. Before we go any further, smash that subscribe button so you never miss content like this. You deserve better than this. You deserve leaders who understand that global industries can't be controlled through blunt force, that tariffs aren't magic wands, that economic policy has real consequences for real people. Mike deserves better. Sandra deserves better. The 8,000 workers who lost their jobs deserve better. The families whose savings are evaporating, whose kids can't go to college, whose retirements are in jeopardy, they all deserve better. Canada didn't steal American aerospace jobs. Canada built an alternative because American policy created the conditions that made it necessary. Bombardier was facing bankruptcy. Airbus saw an opportunity. Canadian leadership provided support. And together, they built something that now rivals Boeing in ways that seemed impossible just 5 years ago. Until American leaders understand that economic strength comes from competence, stability, investment, and smart partnerships, not from threats and tariffs, this trend will continue. Boeing isn't dead, but it's no longer dominant. And in an industry where dominance often determines survival, that might be the beginning of the end. The factories in Seattle are going quiet. The factories in Quebec are roaring. And the workers who spent their lives building the planes that connected the world are learning that in the modern economy, your skill, your dedication, your loyalty, none of it matters if your government destroys the market you depend on. Pause for 1 second and hit that like button. If you're getting value from this, that's the lesson of Boeing's collapse. And it's a lesson America is learning the hard way.